pull people from the foyer and go ahead and get us started in just a moment as people come back in. I hope everyone's lunches settle well and that you all enjoyed great food. I know different ones went to like Frontera, Mexican, delicious, Chinese, saw some Korean food back there. Kind of let everyone get in, just a couple people. Great. Well, welcome back to this afternoon. Thank you, Esteban, for your word this morning. The presence of the Lord was really here as Esteban was talking and as Jamie was sharing and then hearing from Jim. So that was wonderful. This afternoon, what we are going to do together is talk about Love Your City. And when I say Love Your City, we're going to talk specifically about what Boy with the Ball teams do as they go into neighborhoods and love people. The caveat that I would put here is that it's not just for Boy with the Ball teams, but it's also a way that churches and groups can love their neighborhoods. And so that's really probably the framework to think about that as we talk about it this afternoon. And there's a church actually not far from here called Grace Bible Church that has done just that. And they came and participated with us in what we do here on Saturdays and throughout the week in Love Your City. And then they began the same thing in the area right around their neighborhoods. And it was powerful to watch a lot of the elders from their church came and then led a lot of the groups going out into the neighborhood and getting to go with them into the neighborhood right around the house. And one of the elders from their church, he was probably in his 60s, but really neat man. And as he went around each of the houses and just knocked on the door, he said he would start by saying, "This is who I am. I want to start by just saying I'm sorry for being a bad neighbor, because we've been here in the neighborhood, I think he said 20-something years, and we have not gotten to know you." And what that did for people, it just disarmed them immediately and just opened so many doors. And they are continuing to do that in their neighborhood. They've done a lot of things for the community, including some education initiatives and different things. And so when we talk about it today, it'll come from the perspective of our Boy with the Ball teams, but it's also for groups and churches to think about and look at and kind of implement. So we'll be doing that. In just a minute, I'm going to introduce some of the panel and have them come up. But this is your task for the next 45 minutes, is to think of questions as they're talking, things you care about and would like to hear about, because then I'll have some questions for the panel as they come up, but then you guys will be also asking questions towards the end, and we'll kind of have a conversation together about Love Your City. So as you're listening, be writing down some questions, and then we'll ask. So if I could sum up Love Your City in a very short way, and then I will show you a quick animation for that, then I will say this. It's basically doing what Jesus did and doing that, similar to what Esteban was talking about this morning. But Jesus came and lived among us, incarnation. He got to people's hearts and needs, sometimes very quickly. And then he very specifically answered them, demonstration of his power. And then he told them who he was. And that's the proclamation part. So he went and lived among people, got to know what was happening, identified their needs, and then did it for them. Whatever it was for them, he did it. And then he said, "This is who I am." And so hopefully the Lord will help us today come around on how Love Your City helps do that, where the same life of God that Esteban was talking about this morning, people can touch in that. So I'm going to show you the animation, and then I'll recap it very quickly and bring up the panel. The power of Love Your City is just the kingdom and the advancing of the gospel also, and just the participation in that. So as the video pointed out, the basic premise of Love Your City is, again, doing what Jesus did. So starting with a team, going with a group of people. A lot of our Boy with the Ball teams, actually, we use it as a way to pull in a lot of volunteers, which you'll hear some stories about in just a minute. But then as you go into the neighborhood and build relationships with really each of the residents, each of the families, you again quickly get to where needs are. And I would say some you get to very quickly. There was one moment where we opened a door, and it was the first time we'd ever knocked on it, and this lady was standing there crying on the phone, and her dad was passing away in Mexico. So immediately we had an opportunity to pray with her, and the presence of the Lord from the very beginning ministered to her. But then there's some moments that aren't that quick, where then as you walk alongside people, you start to learn that really there's a third grader that can't read, and she won't make it the rest of the time. And so you sit with her and learn to read, and both are demonstrations of God's power, but some quicker than others. But as these relationships are built, you're looking for where God is moving and the Holy Spirit's working, and then looking for opportunities for discipleship and for small groups to happen. That then out of that, you really watch who are the people that are responding to God, and then developing those guys as leaders and setting them in their own communities, which then, as you can see, would continue growing from neighborhood to neighborhood and city to city. So that is the basic premise of Love Your City. And then I'm going to introduce a couple of our panelists, and remember to be thinking of questions. So the first person I'll introduce, you guys can all go ahead and come up. So it's Jen and Josue and Emeka. So Josue Garcia is here with us from Costa Rica. Josue and his wife Anita have been regional directors in Latin America. And we've known them and have gotten to work together for almost 15 years now. And Josue is also very close to Hugo Zelaya, who was one of Charles Simpson's disciples, and then really took a lot of the movement of the Jesus movement of the 60s and 70s to Costa Rica, and there was a large network of churches that he led. And so Josue has come out of that. And then Emeka, we met in 2013 as he was headed back to Nigeria. So Emeka is Nigerian. He's the country director for the Nigeria team. And he was actually living here in the States. He came over as a teenager and then was in the States, and then really heard the Lord call him back to Nigeria to reach young people. And so 2013, he went back and married his wife. Now they have 3 beautiful children. And the team there has grown tremendously, which you'll hear about in just a minute. And then Jen Gomez, she is a big part of our team here in Atlanta. She's originally from Colombia and then moved to New York when she was 10. And then came here to Georgia, did high school here, and then has been a big part. She got invited, I'll have her talk about it in a minute, right into Love Your City, which is how she got connected. And then something about Jen that's pretty neat is she actually works a full-time job as a project manager for a real estate company, but then does that very quickly, and then also leads and has helped develop a lot of stuff here for the global team. So she's very present during the week as well. So she kind of juggles all the balls. So we'll jump into some questions. Vamos bien? Sí. Okay, so Jen, I'll actually start with you. So how did you get involved with Love Your City? And see if that did it. Okay, how did you get involved with Love Your City, and how did that impact your life as a volunteer?
Yeah, I was invited into Love Your City in 2016 by Nina, who's sitting in the audience. She said, hey, would you give me a ride down there? And we got out of her perfectly good car into my car, and we drove down there. And I was like, why am I necessary for this? We had your car. But then I went in, and we got together as a group of people. Then they told me we were going to go knock on people's doors. And I was like, oh, what did I get myself into? And we went there, I think it was Jamie and I, and then the first thing that happened was that people were really responding, like they were kind of excited to see us. And that kind of drew my attention, that they weren't scared, or they were like, who are you? Or they just started sharing about their lives and asking me questions. And then afterwards, we got together to say what we saw and what happened. And I was like, what did you see? And like, well, I saw that this is really important for the community, and what's happening is probably bigger than I can put words to. But I need this. Like, I need it more than anyone. And so then I've been coming ever since.
That's great. Emeka, this one's for you. So as I mentioned, you went back to Nigeria in 2013, and there basically was nothing happening. And now, almost 9 years later, there's 3 teams, not just one in the city where you're living, but it has spread. And so what have you seen as far as Love Your City, playing a part in this? And then, tell us a little bit about your teams and what it looks like in Nigeria.
Well, I will not start this without really recognizing the great and awesome God-given team that God gave me. It's a word to describe it, but I like it actually. Somebody like Ifeanyi, somebody like Oge, somebody like Favor. You have her picture with that colored shirt. They are the team, so they really should be here with me, but they are online too. So what God did was that 2013, got married January to lovely Mary, beloved Mary, and she helped me to acclimate back to the culture. And with that, I began to talk about this lovely thing that the Lord put in my heart, which I've been doing. 2010, 2011, with the Rock Church, we will go out to do mission trips. But then, 2014, Anna and Jamie came September. To cut long story short, that was the first team meeting we had in September. And we didn't step out immediately like we knew what to do. We did not know what to do. We actually started meeting. And we will get on a call, and the Lord will use Jamie and Anna and the team to tell us, it's time to go out. Yeah, we got to go. So when we went out...
Let me interrupt for just a minute. Yes. What were some of the obstacles that you guys were facing in that?
A culture shock, because really in Nigeria, whenever you hear people going and knocking on the doors, like Jen said, it'd be like religious fanatics people, and when you come out, they're like, what do you want? People are like, I want to maybe tell you about Jesus or preach the gospel. But really, that was an obstacle. People didn't quite take it lightly. So what we did was we prayed a lot. We did a lot of talking amongst the team, and the global team helped us. So when we got out, I believe in 2015, the Lord started showing us the first place we stopped was a church, actually. And we saw a young lady cleaning in that church. And we engaged Uche, the one with the colored shirt, engaged this lady. And she already is with a guy that didn't really pay for her dowry, and in Nigeria is a taboo, almost like living in with a guy, having a baby with the guy, and that was one of the first person we reached in that community, Currie, and we started meeting with her on one-on-one, and going to her house, meeting with her children. One of the days in one of the walkthroughs, the child had we came into the house and found that the child had a hot oil pour all over her, and she was just not having it. She's restless, and she needed to sleep. And as a team of, like we always say in boys superheroes, we didn't think of that, but we said we can pray. We prayed for this child. It wasn't long after that prayer, the child fell asleep. The mom kind of walked in, like from the kitchen, and said, "What did you do? What did you all do to make this child to sleep, to now be asleep?" And it was just one of the things that the Lord did to show us that this is His work, incarnate, living it out.
That's great, Emeka. It reminds me of what Esteban was talking about this morning, of just where necessity is, there God is.
Yeah.
So not avoiding those. That's wonderful.
Right.
So, and just to give some context, so that you have a team in Enugu State,
Yes.
Enugu City. Then you also have a team about an hour away.
Yes.
Okay, and then you have a third team that has now started in a village.
In the village, and it's called Omolombe.
I'm not going to try to do
It's
it.
more like a primitive place that this lady, I keep pointing at that picture because she has some pretty
It's the conference
dress.
slide. He's referencing
She was
that.
with us, and one day got married, and the husband is a farmer, and she wasn't all for it, but then that's the husband she married is a farmer, so they went in the bush. You were there.
Mm-hmm.
So they started reaching out the community there, and began to grow, and now have a school from kindergarten to primary, which is great
amazing.
School right now.
Yes, when she's training other teachers,
And
correct?
she's training other teachers and reaching many, many people.
That's great.
Right.
All right. Thank you, Emeka. I'm going to jump over to Josue. One of the amazing things that the Lord has done over the past now 15, 20 years is that one of the communities that we were involved in Costa Rica is now no longer there. And the name of this squatter settlement was El Triángulo. And so Josue was there almost from the beginning of witnessing, being part of what was happening, and then really witnessing the fact that now it no longer exists. So we've asked him to share a couple of things that are like key. What are some key things that helped this happen? And then for people who haven't touched Love Your City, what are things you would tell them?
Bueno, está la parte bonita y la parte triste.
So there's the beautiful part and there's the sad part.
La parte bonita es cuando todos estábamos pensando en que les iban a dar una casa a cada una de estas familias.
So the beautiful part was we were working with the Ministry of Housing, and they were promising basically a house to every family.
Un día me llamó la representante del gobierno para reunirme con toda la comunidad.
So one day, a representative of the government called him and asked him to gather all of the people from the community.
Entonces me subí en unas gradas y yo les dije a ellos, si Dios viniera en este momento y les preguntara, ¿qué quieren?
So he stood at the top of the stairs and then was asking everyone, if God were to come right here in this moment and were to ask you, what do you want?
Entonces ellos dijeron, queremos una casa.
They all said, we want a house.
Entonces compartí con ellos una historia bíblica y después les dije, bueno, vamos a gritar 3 veces todos juntos, Jesús, queremos una casa.
So he shared with them a Bible story and then said that they were going to shout together 3 times, Jesus, we want a house.
Y todo el pueblo estaba diciendo, Jesús, queremos una casa.
So all of the village together, the squatter settlement, was yelling, Jesus, we want a house.
Porque yo les conté la historia a ellos que cuando el ciego vino a Jesús, Jesús le dijo, ¿qué quieres? Y él estaba ciego. Era obvio que quería.
So he was telling them the story of the blind person, that when he came to Jesus, and Jesus said, what do you want? And he was blind. So he obviously wanted to see. He said, I want to see.
Pero él pudo haber dicho, me estás robando protagonismo, no me están dando dinero, diles que me den dinero. Pudo haber dicho el ciego.
He could have easily said, I want money, or I want something else, or you're not giving me this, but he didn't. He said, I want to see.
Y Jesús pudo haber dicho a Judas, dale para 3 meses y que se vaya tranquilo.
And Jesus could have said to Judas, give him provision for 3 months and send him on his way.
Pero Jesús quería oír de sus propios labios, quiero ver.
But Jesus wanted to hear from his own lips, I want to see.
Así es que ellos gritaron, Jesús, queremos una casa.
So they all yelled together, we want a house. Jesus, we want a house.
Vinieron las máquinas, los tractores, quitaron todas las casas y el gobierno dio a las familias su casa.
So tractors came and demolition groups, and they tore the settlement down, and the government gave people a house.
Eso nos dio la oportunidad, como el niño y la bola, para traer la palabra a la comunidad y empujarlos a buscar ayuda en Jesús, no en el niño y la bola.
And so this gave us the opportunity to help people cry out to God and to see Him answer their needs, not boy with the ball.
La buena noticia es que muchas de las familias del Triángulo ahora están viviendo en casas en los cuadros.
So one of the neat parts about this is close to the area where they're working right now, a lot of the families got houses in that area. So a lot of the relationships were able to.
Y eso nos ha facilitado para los vecinos de los cuadros llevar el niño y la bola, porque tenemos familias ahí que nos conocen y ellos están abriendo las puertas a nosotros.
So this has really helped even in what we're doing today currently, because a lot of the families have helped other neighbors even know who we are and have opened doors to us that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Muchas gracias, don Josue. All right, Jen, I'm coming back to you. What does Love Your City look like here in Gwinnett County? So the cool part, as Jen's talking about what it looks like here, is that on Saturday, we'll all be together in the neighborhood. So as she's talking about it, there's double purpose, because we'll be together there, but then she'll explain just a little bit of what it looked like as we first went in and what's happening now.
So Love Your City in Gwinnett County, we started in 2017. We went into a neighborhood that has, I think, like 1,200 people. And a lot of them are mostly immigrant from Central America or Latin America. And we went in, and the neighborhood was pretty friendly. They're really strong families. Latin culture has that about them, that they have really kind of core family structures, and then they really know their neighbors. So they were pretty well woven together to some extent. But that first day, I think we came in and there were like helicopters circling the neighborhood. I think there had been some kind of crime scene, and I think next door there was a grocery store that had a bunch of police cars. So then we kind of got to drive into the neighborhood, and then we started knowing people and asking. And they said that this kind of thing happened most of the time. Like there was a shooting that happened a week ago, and someone that they knew got shot, and like there was some level of crime and like insecurity to live there. But then we got to know families as we came back, as the animation was saying, week after week after week, and started developing friendships that became really maybe deep or really personal. And so much that they threw me and Anna a surprise birthday party. We end up in like each other's doctor's appointments and stuff like that. So there's a lot of relationship. And then out of those friendships, we started creating these developmental groups. So we have things like English as second language classes. We have had kind of job skills training for 18-year-olds or so that are trying to figure out what happens after high school. We have kind of a group of moms, like young moms, that we're seeing opportunity where that could go. We know that the power of a community really could be the women, and so how do we get them together in order to see Love Your City? Not just our team goes and does something to them, but they see the power of Love Your City and then get to participate into it. And then we're watching community leaders from that neighborhood kind of rise up, and it's really great when you have the community on your side, because then by the time that you come up to do tutoring, all the kids are outside and they're really excited to be there. Or they start getting their siblings ready and stuff like that. Or we also have a youth group where we meet here on Saturdays, but it's very fun because we have kind of the leaders from within that youth group that then help us kind of gather them all together. And it becomes then an extension of us. So even if we can't be there every single day, they are. And then they learn to incarnate and proclaim and demonstrate. So it becomes exponential what we do. And so we've seen the community change since then. There's probably very little crime that ever happens. It might be like a random thing like a small thing, but it's pretty safe. And then we've seen families kind of rise out of the neighborhood into better housing and stuff like that. So it's been kind of miraculous to see the progression. But then also the fact that it produces our team to then want to live out these things that we're saying instead of just coming to do a program. Can we use those moments to have conversations where it's Jesus and it's the Holy Spirit changing people's lives?
That's wonderful. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and then ask this next question because that leads it right into it. But sometimes the challenging part to Love Your City is it can quickly become about activities and doing things, like Esteban was mentioning this morning, versus the living, dynamic following of Jesus into Him changing hearts and lives. What do you and your teams do to guard against this? And anyone can answer that.
I'm going to go first because I have the microphone. This is something that's really big right now for me, but then probably for some of our team. I think of when I go into Love Your City, we do a tutoring center or we have English classes and things like that, which are pretty amazing in the way that it's His power showing up in people's lives. It's that demonstration piece where it's very practical help, but then it changes someone's life. However, I can focus my attention on some of those things and be like, how do I make it the best thing ever? And I want to then work 5 days a week or 7 days a week on it and really try to put my efforts into it. But then as I've been praying, the Lord has been speaking of the harvest is there. I don't have to have more people in this program. What happens is the fruit that's available and where His power comes in, and then He does it, which is kind of a shift in the way that I think about it. It becomes really freeing in some ways because then it doesn't depend on my ability or our team's ability. But then in other ways, it's kind of scary for me. Like, how do I rely then on His power and on His Holy Spirit when I'm so driven by the things I can touch and feel and see? So.
Yeah, let me recap the question.
Yes.
How do we not make it
About just activities, but really about the living, the life of the Lord.
We have this thing called family nights in Nigeria now. It connects all the three teams, three sites, and we allow them to come, including us in Enugu. And when we gather, it's like, how do I put it? It becomes electrifying because at one time, somebody we didn't know prophesied, and one person got delivered out of demons. It's just family night will start like on a Friday night, and it will last till Saturday, and we will go all out to whichever community we decided to gather that time. So if it's Molumbe, which is the bush, if it is Udeh, if it is Enugu. So we rotate. Whoever can host us, we just say, we're coming to your place, all of us. And we pass the whole night. And in the morning, we go to the sites where that location is to do the Love Your City. And even as people from Enugu are more like in years, so they would go through and give them pointers of how to do a proper walkthrough. So one, it is not activity on Friday nights because we relax. We even people want to come. They say, people that are not part of the team, they say, can you tell me when is your family night? Because I want to be there too. It's just become a time of just wonderful. People go to parties on Friday. I think for us, it's that family night. But we worship the Lord. We just get slain in the spirit, but in a good way. We don't take alcohol or anything, but the Lord just takes soul over and gets us to a place where we recognize that it is the Spirit. If we are not completely out, allowing the Holy Spirit empowering us, whatever we are going to do the next day may not go as well. So it is Him so that's one of the ways. And
I've seen videos of these family nights. They've sent them, and they do seem pretty amazing. No, that's great, Emeka. It brings up a good point, which is the fact that when Jesus, really, if you watch what Jesus was doing, he was with 12, but 11 then guys for 3 years, over and over again. These were the guys that he prayed for. And if we look at what's happening, though he was around a lot of people, it was these guys he was investing into, and they ended up being the ones whose lives were most impacted and changed, that then went on to change the rest of the world. So it brings up a good point that we, as teams and as the people going, are often we are often most impacted. But I would say it also highlights for us as we go out where we're probably not doing great at certain things, and so it causes us to go, which is part of the reason you'd be out there. So maybe have you seen, I'll pass this over to Don Josue in this question, but how do you see that dynamic occurring in Love Your City, and then how is that, what would you say is some of the most important pieces to that?
Lo más importante cuando vamos a una caminata
So the most important thing when we go out into the community on a walkthrough
es decir a nuestros voluntarios que esto puede cambiar la vida de una persona.
is to say to our volunteers and to us that this can change the life of a person.
Que no es solo ir a caminar.
That it's not just going to walk.
Yo recuerdo la caminata más triste en el Triángulo. La caminata más triste que yo hice en el Triángulo.
Okay, he remembers the saddest walkthrough he's ever had in El Triángulo.
Porque nosotros damos confites a los niños para hacer el contacto en primer lugar.
So they were giving small pieces of candy to kids just to open opportunity and conversation and build relationship.
Y un día que íbamos caminando, dice un niño, ahí vienen los confiteros.
So one day as they were walking through, he hears a child say in the background, "Oh, here come the candy people."
Ese día yo regresé a la oficina y dije, Dios, ¿qué estamos haciendo?
So that day he came back to the office and he said, "God, what are we doing?
Necesitamos tu poder.
We need your power.
No puede ser que nos estén identificando con un confite.
It can't be that they're identifying us with candy."
Empezamos a orar y diciendo, Señor, necesitamos enseñarle a la comunidad a venir a ti.
So they began to pray and they said, "God, we need you to teach us how to teach the community and help the community come to you."
La mejor manera de amar a nuestra ciudad es ser espejos bien limpios para que cuando la luz de Cristo nos pegue, reflejemos exactamente su luz.
The best way to be light into the community is that we are clean mirrors, that when the light of God hits us, it reflects off of us into the community.
Realmente el trabajo de nosotros es mantener nuestro espejo limpio,
So really, our work is to keep our mirrors clean,
permanecer constantemente en su presencia
to stay close and constant in His presence,
para reflejarlo a Él.
to reflect that to the community.
Una señora un día me dice, venga, entre a mi cuarto y se acuesta en mi cama. Y yo, ¿qué?
A lady said to him one time, called him over and was like, "Come in, enter, and lay down in my bed." And he was like, "What?"
Entonces yo dije a unos voluntarios universitarios, entren conmigo.
So he said to some of the university students with him, "Come in with me."
Y ella me llevó a su cama y yo me acosté en su cama.
So she leads him back to the room and he lays down on the bed.
Y me levanté inmediatamente porque los resortes me punzaron la espalda.
And he immediately got up because the springs in the bed were hitting his back.
Y me dijo ella, por eso le dije que se acostara, para que vea que es cierto que no sirven.
So she was like, "That's why I told you to lay down, so you could see that the bed doesn't work."
Yo, ok. Dice, necesito 2 colchones.
So she
¿Usted
said-
puede darme 2 colchones?
So she said, "We need 2 mattresses. Can you give me 2 mattresses?"
Nosotros no damos colchones. Dijimos, el niño y la abuela no da colchones.
So he said, "Well, we don't give mattresses. Boy with the Ball doesn't give mattresses.
Pero vamos a orar porque Dios sí da colchones.
but we'll pray because God does give mattresses.
Y empezamos a orar con ella y los voluntarios que no eran cristianos ni creían en la oración, por supuesto.
So we began to pray, and we actually had some volunteers with us that didn't even believe in prayer. They weren't religious, didn't necessarily believe in God.
Pasó una semana, 2 semanas y 3 semanas y ella preguntaba, ¿hay colchones? No hay
So
colchones.
1 week passed, 2 weeks passed, 3 weeks passed, and she continued asking, are there mattresses yet? And he'd say, there's not mattresses yet.
25 días después, el mismo día, me llamaron del extremo de la ciudad. Tengo un colchón en buen estado, puede venir por él.
25 days later, on the same day, he received 2 phone calls from opposite sides of the city. And they both said, we have mattresses in good condition, can we give them to you?
Y fuimos a traer los colchones. Fuimos donde esta señora y dijimos, Dios proveyó sus colchones.
So we went to go get the mattresses, we took them to the lady, and we gave them to her, and we said, God provided your mattresses.
Amar a nuestra ciudad es enseñarle a depender de Dios.
Loving our city is learning to depend on God. That's what love your city is. Thank you, Don Josue. Gracias. He highlighted something in that a lot of times we have volunteers and people with us that maybe necessarily don't believe in God. And we've actually seen, it's kind of cool because Love Your City ends up being a platform where you have a lot of people flowing into that. And it's part of the reason we say love your city, because it's not just, we don't believe it's just a neighborhood that's in trouble, but it's really like, how does a city learn to love and care again in a way that's transformative? So Love Your City really provides a platform where, whether it's businesses or university students or high school kids or families, we have a lot of families that get involved, but they end up in these situations in pretty dynamic places that ends up impacting them. So maybe just have you guys, if there's a story in particular that you can think of, whether that's a business or a volunteer or someone that's come along to make a difference but then has ended up meeting Jesus in the process. And that I'll give to any one of you.
Me? No.
Josue gave it to you.
No, I meant me as in I was one of those volunteers
yes.
that met Jesus through Love Your City.
True.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of that. But also, it's kind of cool. I think someone said it a few weeks ago that it's people responding to his calling before they knew that they had been called. And then you keep walking out into what he's purpose for your life without you knowing. And then suddenly he shows up, and then you keep going. It's kind of an amazing way that he does it, because he's like breaking down the walls of maybe people's hearts. It's different than just coming into a building and participating in something pretty. It's going out into this adventure, and it makes you want to go too. And then you get to meet him.
Okay.
You have one? It's enough, you think? Okay. So one interesting piece that I just want to touch on before we open up to questions. So get ready. You're about to be in the spotlight too. So have your questions ready. But is just that there's a demonstration of God's power, and that's some of the things we're seeing that meets people in very specific ways. And so I know all 3 of you have stories of God's power. We heard the oil story from Emeka, which was wonderful, and there's a lot of stories that come out of Nigeria on a weekly basis around that. But one thing in particular I want to highlight is one thing you see in Jesus' life is that as he was going out, one part of the presentation of the gospel was a standing up to some of the evil that would stand in the way of people knowing Jesus and growing. And so that there are these power encounters that happen where light confronts dark. And so we definitely saw that in El Triángulo. And there was a period of time where God began clearing out a lot of the gang members that were hurting people. And I would just ask Josue to speak a little bit about that, and then how people came to know Jesus in the midst of that.
Una vez estaba en el edificio ahí en el Triángulo
So one time I was in the building in El Triángulo,
y un hombre sacó un cuchillo muy grande y se lo puso en el cuello a otro hombre.
You saw.
Yo viendo estaba viendo.
So he saw two men, and one of them had a very long knife and put it against the neck of the other.
Entonces yo le dije a él, no puede hacer eso aquí al frente de nuestro edificio.
So he went out and he said, you can't do that here in front of our building.
Sí, don Josué, pero es que él tiene la lengua muy larga y habla demasiado y tiene que aprender.
And the guy said, yeah, Don Josue, but this guy has a really long tongue and he's talking about things he shouldn't talk about.
Le dije, aquí no puede hacer eso.
But Don Josue was like, here you cannot do that.
Bueno, lo que estuvo mal es que dije, aquí no puede hacer. Debía haberle dicho, no puede hacer eso, porque lo llevaron a la vuelta y ahí sí lo hicieron. Bueno.
He said the bad part of that, in hindsight, was I shouldn't have told him just here you can't do that. I should have just said you can't do that because I think he took him around the corner and still did it.
Después los que lo lastimaron salieron corriendo y lo dejaron a él herido ahí.
So right after that, they did take him around the corner and they did hurt him, and then the ones that had done that ended up running away.
Otra vez quisieron asaltar a uno de nuestros profesores.
There was one time where there was a group of guys that wanted to assault one of our teachers.
Y el líder de la banda llegó a preguntarme a mí, ¿quién fue que asaltó al profesor? Y yo le dije, yo no sé, yo no sabía realmente.
The leader of the gang at that time came to Josue and said, who was it, which of the gang members was it that tried to assault the teacher? And Josue said, I don't know.
Entonces él dijo, voy a averiguar quién fue y vamos a hablar con él.
So the gang leader said, well, I'll go find out and we'll talk to him.
La cosa es que en efecto hablaron con él con un balazo en la pierna y le dijeron, no puede tocar a la gente del niño y la abuela.
So they did. They went and talked to him by putting a bullet in his leg and said, you can't hurt boy with the ball people.
Yo por eso no quería decir, ¿verdad? Después yo dije, si me encuentro a él en un pasillo sin salida, ¿qué va a hacer conmigo? Porque va a creer que yo dije que lo pegaron el balazo.
So Josue after that was like, oh man, what if I run into this guy? So El Triangulo had little tiny like winding pathways and corridors, and some of them had ways out and some of them didn't. So he said, well, what if I run into this guy in the middle of one of these corridors and I don't have a way to get out? And he's going to think I'm the one that told on him. What is he going to do to me?
Entonces pregunté a Eliezer, que había sido asaltante antes y ahora estaba con el niño y la abuela. Le dije, ¿qué hago en esa situación?
So he asked one of the team members named Eliezer, who before had actually been one of the gang members who's assaulting, but had met Jesus and now was part of the team. He said, what do I do in this situation?
Él me dijo, usted brinca al techo y va corriendo por los techos y sale corriendo.
He said, you jump on the roof and you run away on the roofs.
Y un día me topé con Chino. Chino se llamaba el muchacho. Dije, Dios, ayúdame. Él venía en callejón.
So sure enough, one day he's walking down a corridor and here comes this guy named Chino. That was his nickname. And he's coming right towards him. So he said, God, please help me. I don't know what to do.
Entonces cuando yo lo vi venir dije, Chino, usted no va a creer que yo mandé a pegar ese balazo en su pierna, ¿verdad?
And so he says, Chino, you're not going to believe when I tell you I wasn't the one that sent those guys to shoot you in the leg.
Y él dijo, no, papá, yo sé que no.
And
Entonces,
he said, no, I know you didn't.
¿podemos orar por tu pierna? Y él dice, sí, por favor, oremos por mi pierna.
So Josue said, can we pray for your leg? And he said, please pray for my leg.
Y aproveché para orar con él y presentar el evangelio a él.
So he took the moment to pray and then also present the gospel to him at the same time.
El líder de la pandilla me llamó un día a la 1 de la mañana y me dijo, don Josué, yo sé que no estamos haciendo las cosas bien, pero no tenemos un mal corazón. Denos tiempo y Dios va a cambiar nuestra vida.
The gang leader called him at a later moment and he said, Don Josue, he said, I know we're not doing things right and we're not doing good things, but he said, our hearts aren't bad. Give us time. Gracias, Don Josue. Okay, so are you guys ready for some questions? I'm going to come down with the microphone, so if you do have a question, and then you guys be ready. Who's up first? This is your moment. Time to shine. Oh, great. Let's do this. Will you tell us who you are also and your name and where you're coming from? Because that will help everyone know.
Thank you. My name's Rod Tucker, and I'm from Kalamazoo, Michigan. this has been really inspiring because I thought I was all alone with what our church was doing, and you guys, like, to see other people who are doing this similar thing is really encouraging. My question is, when you're doing these types of things in your neighborhood and it is incongruent with what all of the other churches around you are doing, and you still want to push for unity in mission, so like churches can come together and work together, what are ways that you guys have been able to communicate that without coming across as like bad or arrogant, or like what are ways that you've been able to bring other churches involved with your mission in your city or your neighborhood?
All right, did you guys understand the question? I will answer that just quickly before I pass it off, but some of the ways here that we've found is that, and Esteban touched on it this morning, that there's a unity that comes out of the call and that there's a bigger mission that we're serving. And so I've watched that as we've been around different groups, that the ones who can see the mission and the call are the ones that we are able to walk with long term, and the ones that don't as clearly or are more focused on their own thing, we know them, but there's not necessarily a way to create that unity because it doesn't exist without seeing the bigger mission together. Would you guys answer any of those, or is that you don't have to, but if you'd like to, yeah.
I'm sorry.
After you.
Okay. Conozco bien eso, muy de cerca.
Said I know this well, very closely.
Mi pastor me dijo una vez, no creo en lo que ustedes hacen.
I had a pastor one time tell me,
Estoy
I
listo
don't
para
believe in
ayudarte
what,
a vos, decime en qué te ayudo, pero no creo en eso.
I don't believe in what you're doing. I'm ready to help you and I'll do things for you, but I don't believe in it.
Yo dije, está bien. Usted no se ha dado cuenta que somos un brazo de la iglesia.
And he said, it's okay. You haven't realized that we're an arm of the church.
Pero el tiempo pasa. Y ahora, dentro de nuestro equipo, tenemos 2 parejas de ancianos de nuestra iglesia en el equipo del niño y la bola.
But as time has passed and people have seen the demonstration of what God has done, now many members of their team are actually sons and daughters of elders in the church.
Y uno de ellos me hizo una pregunta. No quise contestarla. Dice, si vos estuvieras en el lugar nuestro, ¿qué harías?
One of them asked him a question that he didn't want to answer, and he said, if you were in our place, what would you do?
Entonces el papel ahora cambió. Pero hemos amado a nuestra iglesia, hemos servido a nuestra iglesia y entendemos de que no han estado viendo lo que nosotros hemos visto. Pero no tenemos que tener una actitud arrogante, sino de humildad y de servicio.
We have loved and we've served and we've loved and we've served and just realized that maybe they can't see what we're seeing, but not taking an arrogant attitude and just over time trust that the Lord will take care of that.
Okay. What I need to add on this, because it's happening, is that Jesus Choosing People is a church that actually supported us in the beginning, and that's the church, Ifeanyi and I, that's where we go to. But then, in the beginning, most of the Jesus Choosing People team members did not continue. Some went to school and all that. So when we got to the site, we started talking. We saw that Currie has a lot of churches, actually. So we will be there, and they will be looking at us and the pastors and everybody. And we will come to them. One of them, Pastor C, I will say, Pastor C is his name. I won't say the whole name. But then I asked him, would you like us to come with some of the youth to be in your church and do the program we normally do, boys group, on Fridays? And he said, absolutely. I don't get anybody coming into this. I'll stay here and nobody shows up. So we brought like 5 young people, and he was sitting there just watching us do the program in his church, just like a building like this. And he saw dynamics that he's never used before. And and he's one of our volunteers now. So the thing is that there's something unique that we have, that when we look inwards and see that we are not in competition, it's the Spirit, and he's the one saying go, and you heard him clearly. He's going to bring the result. And I'm telling you, we are not in competition or disunity with any church, because we are not drawing their members. We are not there to do. We are reaching young people and their families, and they see it like it's a clear thing.
Thank you, Emeka. Thank you for the question. We're really glad you guys are here. And so these guys, Ed and Sue Liebenthal, are part of our board of directors, can't be here because Ed's dad passed away last week. So we're sad that they can't be here. We're rejoicing with his father, but then glad that you guys are with us this week. So next question, who is it? Don't worry, I've got some more if you don't, but.
We haven't heard a good business story.
Business, yes, this is good. So we were talking about Love Your City as a platform, and so it is a place that draws in businesses as well as universities. I'll actually ask Josue to start by answering this one, because Costa Rica, the team in Costa Rica has, over the years, developed very strong relationships with a lot of corporations and businesses. And so maybe a story of how a business has gotten involved, and then also how that's helped people know Jesus within that.
Una vez me llamó una amiga nuestra, ya una adulta, pero la conocíamos desde que nació.
So one time a friend called him and Anita. They had known her since she was very little, but now she was an adult.
Ella había tenido un hijo soltera, pero ahora estaba casada con un millonario.
And she had, young adult, had a baby as a young woman, but now was married to a millionaire.
Y ella me llamó y dice, ¿pueden ayudar a mi hijo? Tenía como 13 o 14 años, él está pasando muy mal y necesitamos que él vaya a las comunidades con ustedes.
And she said, my son is 13 now, and he's going through some difficult circumstances. Can you help him? Can you spend time with him? Can he go with you into what you're doing in the communities?
Él estuvo como por 4 meses con nosotros, no con la mejor actitud, pero pasando tiempo con nosotros.
So he started coming with them and going into the neighborhoods and was with them 3 or 4 months. Didn't have a great attitude about it, but he was there every week.
Después que él regresó a su casa, su mamá dijo, está mucho mejor que como cuando inició.
So, and as he would come back in the evening from being with them during the day, his mom would say, well, he's much better than when he left.
Después ella preguntó, ¿cómo podemos ayudar para que lo mismo que pasó con Ian pueda pasar con otros chicos?
And so then the mom started asking, how can we help so that the same thing that is helping my son can help other kids?
Y así fue como inició, ellos apoyándonos económicamente en el Niño y la Bola Costa Rica.
And so that's how their family business began supporting the team in Costa Rica economically.
Pero en estos momentos ellos han estado pasando por muchas dificultades de salud, tanto el esposo como ella, y también problemas familiares por drogas en sus hermanos.
So also the same family has been ¿es recién?
Sí, ahora.
So recently has been going through some difficulties as a family with extended family, but then also in their own family, and just has had some struggles, and some of the brothers have had troubles with drugs.
Entonces hemos estado orando por ellos como equipo, orando por su salud, ella pidiendo consejo, constantemente informándonos cómo va la situación, incluso diciendo, por favor, oren para que los gobiernos paguen sus cuentas a mi esposo, ¿verdad? Porque él es dueño de las eólicas en Centroamérica.
So, as a team, they've been praying for their health, for each situation, for the things that have been happening, and she's been asking a lot of counsel and then specifically saying, pray. The business apparently deals a lot with governments, and so one of the things they've been specifically praying about is that the governments would pay the taxes that they owe to her husband and the business.
Al final quiero decirles, Dios no está buscando capacidad, sino disponibilidad.
So he's saying God doesn't, in the end, look for capacity from us. He looks for availability.
Si usted está dispuesto a seguir la voz de Dios, everything under control.
So if you're willing to follow God's voice, everything's under control. I will also just jump in too. There's a lot of stories that we could tell about businesses. Last year we highlighted one just here in Duluth, which is down the road, but where an eye doctor, we had a volunteer that came that was working at the front desk of an eye doctor, and she was like, this is amazing, I want to get my clinic involved. And so her doctor started getting involved. And it really miraculous when you're talking about blind people seeing. So they've seen now over 80 people in the Saracourt community. And you really do watch where people can't see and then all of a sudden can see in a whole way. But then what's been kind of neat lately is that her whole family has started getting involved. She's actually gotten married and moved, and now her family is getting involved. And there's a lot of stories like that. There's another one Josue could tell, but not for time. But there's a lot of the corporations in Costa Rica. One of the ladies that we knew even as we were down there, she got very involved in helping, but through just the relationship with Josue and Anita ended up really meeting Jesus out of that, and then has been a significant part of the team down there since then, but is very well connected in the business and corporate community, and so is always calling and asking what she can do and connecting in their businesses.
Yeah, and then I think I would also add, like here in Atlanta, as we've met with businesses, we've realized, or businesses have realized that coming out of the pandemic, they're having a hard time finding really good workers and really good employees. But out of Love Your City, both in a community and in schools, you have these really amazingly developed young people that some of them will go into college and do that route. But then there's also the going into meaningful work. And so you watch the way that, because young people have really good characters, because they've learned things of the kingdom, like showing up on time. Sometimes some of those things are things that he teaches us are pretty practical. But then they also benefit companies that really need that, good workers and stuff like that. So we're watching a lot of companies be very excited about a partnership that's a little more intimate than just giving is a wonderful opportunity, but then also how do you partner together into caring for their communities, and then their communities are meaningfully impacting their business too.
That's great. Last question. Will you introduce yourself?
You need to stand up. Hi, panelists. Hi, everyone. My question goes to the three of you panelists. Being that I work with the government of Kenya, I'd like to know, are there instances whereby in the process of carrying out your mandate or your programs that you partner with the government? And in the same breath, are there areas whereby government policies are in collision with your policies, and how do you go about it? Because I know in some cases there might be government interference in some of the mandates that you carry. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Bob Collins Otieno. I'm from Kenya. I'm the vice chairperson of the board of directors, Fikisha.
It's wonderful to have you, Bob. So that was a two-part question. So the first one was, how have you worked with governments? And then the second was, do you ever find where what's happening is hard, with the government is hard then to do what we're doing? But.
I'll start with Nigeria at Edo River Girls, which is a government school now. So pre-COVID, before COVID, that's what I mean. So we did not have problems. We went there, submitted our letters, they accepted us. And now with what's happening, schools are trying to catch up, and they are struggling. And we see the inhibition. Last week, Udeh was there talking to the headmistress on the principal of the school, and she said, this is not a good time because the young people are trying to catch up still. And with the southeastern Nigeria, the situation I've been describing with the rebels, and they could just say, there's a seat at home, and everyone sits at home. And it's not even the government saying it. So with that, we have seen a little bit inhibition with that. But then our prayer and the mandate we have is not to let these young people just be out there and not being reached, So we are devising new methods, maybe after school. Maybe they could come around the office and we've given them that choice and do that, which the school doesn't have anything to say no, because now it depends on the young person to come after the schools are out with the permission of their parents, which we do have that permission as well. So that's one way. Because it's a government school, so that happens. The other part.
Yeah, it's great. That was great. Yeah, that actually kind of answered both. The really quick thing I would say is we've worked a lot with governments also over the years. And you even heard in the El Triangulo story that we partnered with the Ministry of Housing and some other ministries that were part of Costa Rica, the Ministry of Education. And then here locally, we partner with a lot of government officials. We have a lot of the city of Lawrenceville where we are, but then some of the state. We were meeting with a state senator recently as well. So there's a very important part that the government plays. So glad you brought that up. I'm going to end our time together. So just kind of recapping that Love Your City, again, it's one way to go out, but it is a way, and it probably is some of the new kinds of ways that churches, organizations, people will have to find to be present in communities that aren't happening currently or beginning to happen. And so, and then just it's what Jesus did. He lived it. He found people's needs. He met them very specifically, and then he said, this is who I am. And that is what we're doing as we go out into Love Your City. So thank you guys. Thank you to you guys for being part of this. This will conclude this afternoon. You're welcome to stay and mingle, get to know people for a little bit. We will be back tomorrow morning at 9:30. And so we will see you tomorrow morning at 9:30. Thank you guys for all being here, and we're looking forward to more time with you.